My best friend stole my fiancé, so I took over her dream job, and watching her crumble was sweeter than any wedding cake I'll never taste. The notification sound still makes my stomach drop. 3 months later, and I can still feel that sickening lurch when I saw the Instagram story that destroyed everything. Sarah's manicured hand intertwined with fingers I'd kissed 1,000 times. The engagement ring I'd helped Marcus pick out glinting on her finger like a middle finger pointed directly at my heart. I remember staring at my phone screen in the grocery store parking lot, my vision tunneling until all I could see were those two hands. The bag of wedding favor samples I'd been carrying slipped from my numb fingers, scattering across the asphalt like confetti at a funeral. A woman loading groceries into her car nearby asked if I was okay, her voice reaching me through what felt like thick glass. I wasn't okay. I would never be okay again. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, it was how long it had been happening right under my nose. How many times had Sarah sat across from me at our favorite coffee shop, listening to me gush about wedding plans while she was already wearing my ring in secret? How many times had she nodded sympathetically when I complained about Marcus working late, knowing he was actually with her? My hands shook so violently I could barely drive home. Every red light felt like an eternity to think about how stupid I'd been. How I'd actually thanked Sarah for helping me address wedding invitations just 2 weeks earlier. How she'd smiled and told me I was lucky to have found someone like Marcus. The apartment felt like a crime scene when I walked in. Every photo on the mantle, every shared memory, every plan we'd made together, all of it contaminated. I found myself standing in the bedroom doorway, staring at the bed we'd shared, wondering how many times he'd been thinking about her while lying next to me. That's when the rage hit. Not the explosive kind you see in movies. This was different, cold, calculating. It started as a whisper in the back of my mind and grew stronger with each breath. They didn't get to do this to me and walk away unscathed. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus asking if I wanted to grab dinner. The casual normalcy of it made bile rise in my throat. He was still playing the part of the devoted fiancé while secretly planning his escape. The audacity was breathtaking. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging. You learn things about people when you've been in their lives for over a decade. Sarah had been my roommate in college, my maid of honor at what should have been my wedding, my business partner in a failed jewelry venture 3 years ago. I knew her social security number. I knew her mother's maiden name. I knew she'd been desperately trying to land a position at Hartwell & Associates, the premier marketing firm downtown, for the past 2 years. More importantly, I knew she'd been rejected from that position twice. What Sarah didn't know was that my cousin Jake had recently been promoted to senior partner at Hartwell. The same Jake who'd sat next to me at every family gathering, who still sent me birthday cards, who'd offered to help me with my career more times than I could count. The plan crystallized slowly, like ice forming on a window. I spent the next 3 days in a strange state of suspended animation. Marcus continued texting, calling, even stopping by the apartment when I didn't answer. I watched him through the peephole, noting how his shoulders sagged when I didn't open the door, how he pressed his forehead against the wood like he was genuinely confused by my silence. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Sarah called too, her voice bright with fake concern when she left voicemails asking if I was feeling all right, if I needed anything, if she could come over with ice cream and wine like we used to do during college breakups. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I refined my plan. The first step was the hardest. I had to see them together. Had to witness the crime with my own eyes, not just through the filtered lens of social media. I needed the fuel that only comes from watching someone you trusted stab you in the back in real time. Finding them wasn't difficult. Marcus had always been a creature of habit, and Friday nights meant drinks at Kelly's, the Irish pub near his office. I arrived early, claiming a corner booth with clear sightlines to the entrance. My heart hammered against my ribs as I nursed a glass of wine and watched the door. They walked in together at exactly 7:30, and seeing them in person was like being punched in the solar plexus all over again. Sarah's hand rested on his lower back as they scanned for a table. The gesture was so casual, so comfortable, it spoke to months of practice. This wasn't new love, this was established intimacy. Marcus looked different, lighter somehow. He was laughing at something she whispered in his ear, his face more animated than I'd seen it in months. Had I been draining the life out of him without realizing it? Had Sarah been giving him something I couldn't? The thoughts were poison, but I swallowed them down and kept watching. They chose a high-top table near the bar, and I could see them clearly from my shadowy corner. Sarah threw her head back when she laughed, her auburn hair catching the light. She'd always been beautiful, but tonight she practically glowed. Love looked good on her. My love looked good on her. I stayed until they left, memorizing every touch, every shared glance, every moment of happiness that belonged to me. By the time I walked to my car, my jaw ached from clenching it so hard, but my resolve had hardened into something unbreakable. Phase 1 was reconnaissance. Phase 2 was positioning. I called Jake the next morning, my voice carefully modulated to hide the rage still coursing through my veins. He was delighted to hear from me, immediately launching into updates about his kids, his wife, the new house they'd bought in the suburbs. I let him talk, waiting for the right moment to steer the conversation where I needed it to go. When he finally asked about my life, I let my voice crack just slightly, told him about the wedding being called off. Not the whole truth, just enough to garner sympathy. He made all the right sounds, offered all the right platitudes, and then, like clockwork, asked if there was anything he could do to help. That's when I mentioned my interest in marketing, how I'd been thinking about a career change, how I'd always admired the work Hartwell and Associates did for their clients. Jake's enthusiasm was immediate and genuine. Of course he'd be happy to set up an interview. Did I have a portfolio ready? A resume? When could I come in? I told him I'd need a few weeks to prepare, that I wanted to make sure I put my best foot forward. He understood completely and promised to put in a good word with the hiring team. The irony was delicious. While Sarah was probably planning her wedding to my ex-fiancé, I was positioning myself to steal the dream job she'd been chasing for years. But first, I needed to become qualified for it. I threw myself into preparation with the single-minded focus of someone with nothing left to lose. 16-hour days studying marketing trends, consumer psychology, digital strategy. I enrolled in online courses, read every industry publication I could find, analyzed Hartwell's client campaigns until I could recite their brand strategies in my sleep. My friends, the ones who didn't know about Marcus and Sarah yet, worried about me. They said I looked thin, that I had dark circles under my eyes, that maybe I should take some time to grieve instead of diving headfirst into a new career. They didn't understand. Grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. Grief was what weak people did when they wanted to wallow in their victimhood. I wasn't weak anymore. I was becoming something else entirely. The transformation was both internal and external. I cut my hair shorter, sharper, bought a new wardrobe, professional pieces that made me look competent and unshakable. I practiced interview questions in front of the mirror until my answers sounded natural, confident, like someone who'd been in marketing for years instead of weeks. Most importantly, I studied Sarah, not in a creepy stalker way. I simply paid attention to the things she posted online, the way she talked about her career aspirations, her strengths and weaknesses as a potential employee. She was creative, I'd give her that. Her Instagram was a carefully curated blend of lifestyle and professional content that showcased her eye for visual storytelling. But she was also impatient, entitled. She'd grown up wealthy, attended private schools, never really struggled for anything in her life. The rejections from Hartwell had stung because she wasn't used to hearing no. She expected doors to open for her based on her charm and connections alone. I, on the other hand, had learned to work for everything. 3 weeks into my preparation, Marcus finally cornered me. I was leaving the library downtown. I'd taken to studying there instead of at home, where every corner held memories of our life together, when I saw his car in the parking lot. He was leaning against the driver's side door, arms crossed, looking like a man who'd been rehearsing a speech for weeks. My stomach clenched, but I kept walking toward him with steady steps. When I was close enough to see the guilt written across his face, he straightened and opened his mouth to speak. I could see the words forming, probably some variation of the classic breakup speech. "It's not you, it's me. I never meant for this to happen. You deserve better." I cut him off before he could start. My voice was calm when I told him I already knew. About Sarah. About how long it had been going on. About the ring that should have been mine gleaming on her finger. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. He started to stammer out excuses, explanations, apologies, but I held up a hand to stop him. I told him I didn't want to hear it. That whatever he thought he needed to say, whatever guilt he was trying to assuage, it wasn't my job to absolve him anymore. Then I walked past him to my own car, feeling his shocked stare burning into my back. It wasn't until I was safely inside, doors locked, that I allowed my hands to shake for exactly 30 seconds. Then I started the engine and drove away, leaving him standing in that parking lot with his unspoken apologies. That night, I called my cousin. Jake was thrilled when I told him I was ready to interview. He'd already spoken to the hiring manager about me, he said. They were excited to meet someone with my background. Apparently, my years in customer service had translated well in his description of my people skills. We scheduled the interview for the following Tuesday. The same day, I noticed when I checked Sarah's Instagram that she had her monthly coffee date with her former colleague from Hartwell. The woman who'd become her inside connection, her hope for eventually landing a position there. The timing was perfect. I spent the weekend fine-tuning my portfolio. Every campaign mock-up, every strategy proposal, every creative brief was designed to showcase not just my newfound marketing knowledge, but my understanding of Hartwell's specific clients and culture. I'd studied their work so intensively that I could predict their preferences, mirror their aesthetic, speak their language fluently. Monday night, I allowed myself one last look at Sarah's social media. She'd posted a photo from her weekend getaway with Marcus, a cozy cabin retreat that looked suspiciously like the one he'd originally booked for our honeymoon. They were cuddled together on a rustic porch, wine glasses in hand, her engagement ring prominently displayed as she held her glass. The caption read, "Sometimes the universe has bigger plans than we do. Grateful for unexpected love and new beginnings." I screenshotted it, not out of masochism, but as a reminder of what they'd taken from me and what I was about to take back. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully, a navy blazer that conveyed authority without being aggressive, subtle jewelry that suggested success without ostentation. My hair was pulled back in a sleek bun that showcased the sharp lines of my new cut. In the mirror, I looked like someone who belonged in a corner office, someone who got what she wanted. Hartwell and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. The lobby was all polished marble and modern art, designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. I announced myself to the receptionist with a confidence I'd spent weeks cultivating. The wait was brief. Jake appeared within minutes, his face lighting up when he saw me. He looked older than I remembered, more distinguished in his expensive suit and perfectly styled hair. Success suited him. The interview team was exactly what I'd expected. 3 partners, including Jake, and the creative director who would be my immediate supervisor. They were polite, professional, and just skeptical enough to make the challenge interesting. But I was ready for them. Every question was an opportunity to demonstrate not just my knowledge, but my passion for the work. When they asked about my experience with brand positioning, I referenced their recent campaign for a tech startup, analyzing what had made it successful while suggesting subtle improvements. When they inquired about my digital strategy background, I pulled out examples that mirrored their house style so closely they could have been internal projects. The creative director, a sharp-eyed woman named Miranda who'd clearly seen every type of applicant imaginable, leaned forward when I presented my portfolio. She flipped through each page slowly, asking pointed questions that would have destroyed a less prepared candidate. Instead, they became opportunities to shine. By the time the interview concluded, the energy in the room had shifted. Jake was practically glowing with pride. The other partners were exchanging glances that spoke to impressed surprise. Miranda was already talking about next steps, about when I could start, about the projects that would be perfect for my skill set. I walked out of that building knowing I'd won, not just the job, but something more valuable, the proof that I was capable of becoming whoever I needed to be to get what I wanted. The call came Thursday afternoon. Miranda's voice was warm when she offered me the senior marketing strategist position, the exact role Sarah had been chasing for 2 years. The salary was more than I'd ever imagined making. The benefits were exceptional. The start date was in 2 weeks. I accepted with gracious enthusiasm, then hung up and allowed myself a smile that no one else would have recognized. Now came the best part. I waited until Friday evening to make my announcement. A simple LinkedIn post about my excitement to be joining the Hartwell and Associates team, tagged with the company and several partners, including Jake. Professional, understated, perfectly calculated to show up in the feeds of everyone who mattered. Sarah's response was swift. My phone buzzed with a call from her less than an hour after the post went live. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message with something approaching glee. Her voice was strained, confused, trying to sound happy for me while clearly struggling to process what this meant for her own aspirations. She congratulated me, said she had no idea I was interested in marketing, asked if we could grab coffee soon to celebrate. I didn't return the call. Instead, I spent the weekend strategically liking and commenting on posts from my new colleagues, establishing my presence in their professional ecosystem. By Monday morning, I was already being included in email threads, invited to client meetings, welcomed into the inner circle that Sarah had been desperately trying to penetrate for years. My first day at Hartwell was a masterclass in reinvention. I arrived early, introduced myself to everyone I met, and dove into the client files with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found her calling. Because in a way I had, not marketing itself, that was just a means to an end, but the intoxicating power of strategic thinking, of identifying weaknesses and exploiting them, of winning. The work itself was engaging enough. Consumer behavior analysis, brand positioning, creative strategy development. I had a natural aptitude for understanding what made people want things, probably because I'd spent months studying what made people betray the people they claimed to love. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that every success I had was a door closing for Sarah. Every client presentation I nailed was another nail in the coffin of her dreams. Every compliment from Miranda or nod of approval from the partners was evidence that I'd not only stolen her opportunity, I was better at it than she ever could have been. The industry was smaller than people realized. Word traveled fast about new talent, about rising stars, about who was making an impact where. Within a month, I knew Sarah would be hearing my name in professional circles. Hearing about the new senior strategist at Hartwell, who was already being considered for the Morrison account, the prestige client she'd mentioned wanting to work with in at least a dozen social media posts. I got the Morrison account 6 weeks into the job. The day the assignment was announced, I allowed myself a small celebration. Nothing excessive, just a glass of wine at the same bar where I'd watched Marcus and Sarah together all those months ago. This time I sat at the bar itself, visible and confident, no longer hiding in shadowy corners. I was halfway through my drink when I saw them. They entered together just like before, but something was different. The easy intimacy I'd witnessed months earlier had been replaced by a subtle tension. Sarah's smile seemed forced. Marcus kept checking his phone. They chose a table in the back, away from the crowd. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I didn't need to. Body language told the story clearly enough. Sarah was animated, gesturing with the frustrated energy of someone trying to make a point. Marcus was leaning back, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a man who'd heard this argument before. They were fighting about me, about my success, about how my new position had complicated Sarah's professional ambitions. I was sure of it. The knowledge was sweeter than the wine. I finished my drink slowly, savoring both the alcohol and the view of their obvious discord. When they left, separately, I noted with interest, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any revenge fantasy could have provided. This was just the beginning. Over the next few months, I systematically dismantled every professional connection Sarah had cultivated in the marketing world, not through sabotage or gossip, nothing so crude or traceable. Instead, I simply became better connected, more respected, more visible than she could ever hope to be. When her former colleague at Hartwell, the one she'd been having those monthly coffee dates with, needed a recommendation for a freelance project, I was the one who came to mind. When industry networking events were planned, I was invited while she was overlooked. When speaking opportunities arose, my name was at the top of the list. I built my reputation on competence and results, but the strategic positioning was entirely deliberate. Every success was designed to eclipse her, every achievement crafted to close doors she hadn't even known were opening. The turning point came at the annual Marketing Excellence Awards ceremony. I'd been nominated in the Rising Star category for my work on the Morrison campaign, the same campaign Sarah had once dreamed of leading. The nomination itself was gratifying, but what made the evening truly perfect was seeing Sarah across the ballroom. She was there as someone's +1, wearing a dress that tried too hard to compete with the established professionals around her. She looked beautiful, as always, but also out of place, like someone playing dress-up instead of someone who belonged. When my name was called as the winner, the applause felt like absolution. I accepted the award with gracious humility, thanking my team, my mentors, the clients who'd trusted me with their brands. But as I looked out at the audience from the podium, my eyes found Sarah's face in the crowd. The expression there was everything I'd worked for. Shock, envy, The dawning realization that the life she'd stolen from me had led directly to her own professional downfall. Marcus wasn't with her that night. I'd heard through the office gossip network that they'd been having problems, that the engagement was on hold while they worked through some issues. The issues, I suspected, had a lot to do with the fact that Sarah was spiraling professionally while watching her former best friend soar to heights she'd never reach. Guilt is a powerful relationship killer. So is resentment. And Sarah, I knew, had both in abundance. The months that followed were a blur of success and subtle victories. I was promoted to account director. I was featured in industry publications. I was invited to speak at conferences where Sarah's name would never even be whispered in the green room. Meanwhile, her social media presence grew increasingly desperate, posts about new opportunities and exciting changes that everyone in the industry knew were code for still unemployed. Photos of her and Marcus became rarer, and when they did appear, both of them looked strained. I never reached out, never gloated directly, never did anything that could be construed as cruel or vindictive. I simply lived my best life loudly enough for her to hear it from whatever corner she'd been relegated to. The final blow came almost exactly 1 year after I'd started at Hartwell. Miranda called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon, her expression serious but not unkind. For a moment, I wondered if I'd miscalculated somewhere, if my carefully constructed professional image had slipped. Instead, she offered me the promotion I'd been positioning myself for since my first day, Senior Director of Brand Strategy, with my own team and a client roster that included some of the most prestigious brands in the city. The salary was more than double what I'd been making. The office was corner adjacent with windows that looked out over the downtown skyline. The respect that came with the title was everything I'd been working toward. But more than that, it was the job Sarah would never have, could never have. Because while she'd been content to coast on charm and connections, I'd built something real, something earned. That evening, I updated my LinkedIn profile with the news. Within hours, the congratulations poured in. Colleagues, clients, industry contacts, all celebrating my achievement with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for people genuinely respected in their field. Sarah's congratulations message came 3 days later, a brief, stilted comment that managed to sound both bitter and defeated. "Congratulations on your continued success." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. 2 weeks later, I heard through Jake that she'd taken a marketing coordinator position at a small firm in the suburbs. Entry-level pay. No advancement opportunities. The kind of job college graduates took when they couldn't find anything better. The kind of job she'd once told me she'd rather die than accept. I felt no pity. Pity was for people who'd been unlucky, who'd been victims of circumstance. Sarah had made her choices. She'd chosen to betray someone who loved her for someone who belonged to another person. She'd chosen to steal a life instead of building her own. The consequences were simply the universe restoring balance. Marcus, I learned through mutual friends, had called off the engagement entirely. The official story was that they'd grown apart. The truth, I suspected, was that he'd realized Sarah wasn't the person he'd thought she was. That someone willing to betray her best friend might eventually be willing to betray him, too. He'd tried to reach out to me a few times over the year, sending emails that I deleted without reading. I had no interest in his apologies or explanations. He was part of the past I'd systematically dismantled and rebuilt into something stronger. Now, sitting in my new office with its panoramic view of the city, I can trace the path from that devastating Instagram story to this moment of complete professional triumph. Every step had been calculated, every move strategic, every victory earned through careful planning and relentless execution. Some people might call it revenge. I prefer to think of it as justice. Sarah took something that belonged to me, thinking there would be no consequences, that I would simply accept the betrayal and move on, probably with some platitude about everything happening for a reason. Instead, I proved that actions have consequences. That betrayal comes with a price. That sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting everything the other person wanted and being better at it than they ever could have been. My phone buzzes with a text from Miranda about tomorrow's client meeting. Another high-profile account, another opportunity to cement my reputation as someone who gets results. I respond quickly, professionally, already thinking 3 steps ahead to the presentation strategy that will win us the business. In my peripheral vision, I catch a glimpse of the awards on my bookshelf. The Rising Star Trophy I'd won that night Sarah watched from the audience. The Industry Excellence Award from last month. The recognition letter from the mayor thanking me for my work on the city's rebranding campaign. All of it earned. All of it deserved. All of it built on the foundation of what Sarah tried to take from me. She thought she was stealing my future when she took Marcus. Instead, she gave me the motivation to build a better one than I'd ever imagined possible. The irony is perfect. In trying to destroy my life, she handed me the tools to construct something far more valuable than anything I'd lost. I close my laptop and gather my things, ready to head home to the apartment I bought last month, the penthouse unit in the building I'd dreamed of living in since college. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, new victories to add to the collection. And somewhere across town, Sarah will wake up in whatever mediocre life she's settled for, probably wondering how everything went so wrong. I hope she remembers me when she does. I hope she understands finally that some betrayals are too expensive to afford. My best friend stole my fiancé, thinking she was taking my happiness. Instead, she gave me something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that I'm capable of anything I set my mind to, including revenge served colder than any dish she'll ever taste.